Why am I here today? Well, I'm just going to be blunt. I'm here to talk about love and design, and what it means to design something that people truly love. And so in the intro, you heard about these technological forces that are washing over the world, and the fact that we have like AI coming on board, and there's a question around how we actually deal with it. Well, today I'm going to be talking about something much more fundamental, which is about humans working together. And what it means to actually create a product that truly promotes a level of love between people and for the product. So at Airbnb, we think about this a lot, what it means to actually create something that people love. Because when you travel, when travel is at its best, it is an experience that actually people do love. And so our goal is to create a travel experience that actually does that promotes love. But that's really hard to do because what you love and what I love are extremely different. It's a very personal thing, especially when you're traveling. The type of travel that you want to do is very personal. And so this means that when we design at Airbnb, we focus on making something great. This is the first thing we do. We focus on making something great for at least one person. And if we can succeed at doing that making that personalized experience fantastic, then we try to figure out how to do that more efficiently. And this is, in a nutshell, doing design that doesn't scale. It's a way of doing design. It's not about scalability. And so just a sort of a side note around what it means to actually design for scale, I could use Google or Uber as two examples of companies that I think do a really good job of this. I've worked at both of these companies. I had a wonderful time at both. And I'll just give you a sort of a brief insight into a perspective on Google and how they work. So at Google, I led teams that were focusing on search, payments, travel, and shopping. And when you look at Google, they have this massive demand for information. So there's people, almost, most of the world other than China is coming to Google trying to get information. That's what they use it for. And on the other side, you have this supply. So it's actually a marketplace. Demand coming into Google, and then supply of information. Google's able to provide that. When I was on the travel team, actually, I had this experience, this was around 7 years ago, where Google purchased the company that actually maintains all of the world's flight information and price. It's called ITX. That's why Google Flights is so darn fast. And so when people come to Google to actually get that information, boom, it's there in a second. And this is truly wonderful. And when designing at Google, the things that we focused on, I would just categorize into three different things. One was, is it useful? Second, is it usable in terms, like, is it blazingly fast? Then the last one was really, if you could twist an engineer's arm to create an animation or kind of make something kind of like sing a little bit, then we could get to a level of that thing being delightful. So useful, usable, and delightful. But fundamentally, the products that we built, at least within the search team, you could call, they were utilities. In other words, the goal of those products was to essentially provide the lowest common denominator of usability, something that works for everybody across the world, right? So it was really about scaling and providing a utility. And this is great, right? They do this really well. They're the best at this, and it's a huge service for humanity. And at Google, I learned that designing for scale leads to many things, but it doesn't lead to a product that people truly love. At least that's how I see it. So what does it mean to design products that people truly love? My belief is that when you design a product for love, it's best measured by the outputs. And there's three signals that are important to be aware of. So the first, was that product memorable? In other words, after you experienced it, do you remember it the week after, a year after, 10 years after? I think about using Google, for example, like 3 months ago. I can't really remember that. But when I think about my experience using Legos as like a 7-year-old boy, and that one piece of Lego in my space station, I remember it to this day. I truly love that Lego set. So that's one signal. The next signal is it magical? And by magical, what I mean is, does it take your expectation and then just blow it out of the water? So this is a really hard thing to do. Oftentimes, when you talk about like VR, you put on a VR helmet, now you're skydiving. It's magical. It exceeds your expectations for skydiving with a helmet on. But then if you actually do go skydiving, that then even exceeds your expectations even more. So what I found is that oftentimes the most magical things are the things that you encounter in real life. And then lastly, and this is, I think, probably the most important point, is that the third signal is, was it transformational? After you had the experience of the product, did your life change? Did you have a new outlook on life? Did you have a new perspective? And that's really hard to attain. But when all these things all three things come together, it's magical, it's memorable, and it's transformational, then I think what you've got is something that people truly love. And so let's look at a few examples of what I think are really great things that people love. So the first is movies. Think about how hard it is to design a movie. All the inputs, you've got actors, you've got technology, you've got production staff. It all comes into this movie. And if every ingredient in that movie is fantastic, so each of those components, they all come together, you get a movie that wins awards. And Shape of Water was an outstanding movie. It actually was extremely memorable to me, and there was some transformation that I experienced. And so I think this is a really interesting example. When you get all those ingredients together, how a great movie can actually move you. Another one is books. And I remember snuggling up to my dad and reading Where the Wild Things Are when I was a kid and learning about Max and his surly ways. And that book has transformed my life. Another one is music and concerts. You go to a concert, you feel like the viscerality of the experience. My first concert was 9 Inch Nails' Downward Spiral. It was a pretty amazing concert. Trent Reznor designed all the light show. He designed the backdrops. He obviously designed the music. All the inputs that went into that concert were so good. And, although I was on substances during the concert, that which made it a transformational experience, I didn't need to actually be on those. It was fundamentally transformation to begin with. Don't tell my parents. And then the last one is travel. Take a moment to think about the last time you've traveled. Not for business, but it might have been a few years ago, but when you traveled solo, when you had that adventure, that you really pushed yourself out there, that feeling you had of transformation. I think that's really the key here. I had this experience. I spoke at a conference in Vienna right after grad school, and I was staying at a hostel, and I met some people at the conference who lived in Vienna, and they invited me to stay in their flat. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I went out to bars with them, I ate dinner with them, I lived like a local. And that transformed me, and I remember that to this day. And so what's similar about these things? Movies, books, concerts, travel. Well, they all happen to be very difficult to design at scale. That's why you don't have 15 Academy Awards per year, award movie per year. That trip you took, that movie you watched, that concert that you attended, each required so many unique ingredients to make it up. And when all these ingredients are at their best, they inspire a level of love, and they're memorable, and they're magical, and they transform people. And that is the challenge that we face at Airbnb. Our goal is to create travel experiences that people love. And this is just hard to do at scale. So instead, we take a different approach. As I mentioned before, we focus on designing one thing that at least is lovable for one person. And once we know that it works, then we focus on how to making it scale. So to demonstrate, I'll walk you through 2 projects. The first project is Magical Trips. This was started a few years ago. And this is the story of how Airbnb developed its fundamental approach to understanding transformational travel and all the components that go into it. And the second project is Airbnb Plus, which we released earlier this year. And this tells the story of how we took one of the primary ingredients in travel, the home itself, the place that you stay, we made it even more lovable. And so my hope is that through these stories, you'll come away with a newfound appreciation for all the work and the process that goes into creating products that people truly love. So let's start with Magical Trips. To set context, the year is 2015, and Airbnb has set out on a quest to define what transformational travel really is and the meaning of transformational travel. So they had a team that was developed that focused on magical trips. They were the Magical Trips team. And they identified that most travel companies just focus on packaging up flights and tours and tour buses. And this oftentimes results in the feeling of commoditized travel. You can actually scale quite a number of people into a tour bus, and this is something like a tour bus in Fisherman's Wharf. And this is unfortunately a very common travel experience that people have. And if this is your travel experience when you've come to San Francisco, I want to apologize. This is not San Francisco. Because you haven't experienced San Francisco in this tour bus. What you've experienced, on the other hand, is a cliche. The real San Francisco lives in its neighborhoods, in the smaller neighborhoods, not in Fisherman's Wharf. It lives in its clubs, in its nightclubs, in its smaller restaurants. It lives in the people. That's really where San Francisco lives, is the people in San Francisco. So the challenge is, how do you actually make that connection with the people? Staying in a hotel, leaving the hotel and getting on a tour bus, taking that tour around, is just not going to get you that same experience. So instead, what the team wanted to do is understand, how could they make travel transformational in a truly authentic way? And so they looked at a number of models that exist, and one that they found, which is, it's a really wonderful model, is Joseph Campbell's hero journey. So for those of you who don't know, Joseph Campbell is an American mythologist. and he studied the world's religions and myths. And he found a common arc that's inherent in almost every great myth. And this common arc is taught now in film school, and almost every movie that you'll see that has a dramatic arc to it actually maintains this hero journey process. So I'll use the example of Luke Skywalker to walk you through this. Okay, so Luke is in Tatooine, and he's this dissatisfied kid. And then he has this call to adventure when he meets his mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so then Luke he's promoted to cross the threshold, and he leaves Tatooine, and now he's moved on. He's moved into the unknown world. Then he meets Yoda when he has a bunch of challenges and temptations, and he has a revolution and a revelation and a rebirth, and he starts to gain some Jedi skills and faces changes and then atonement for his past surly ways. And now he's a Jedi Knight and returns back to the scene to fight Darth Vader with his Jedi powers, these new gifts and this lightsaber that he has. It's a very classic hero's journey arc. Now, we took this arc and we wanted to understand what this meant for travel. So with travel, it means you arrive in a new place. Ideally, you meet hosts. You meet the people who will welcome you into their home. Then you explore the city. And Airbnb has a product called Experiences. If you go to Airbnb right now on your app, you'll see Experiences. This product they're hosted experiences. You'll learn how to do pottery with somebody who will teach you, a pottery mentor. You might learn how to DJ, and then after learning how to DJ, you'll go out to a club with the experience host. So this notion of exploration is hosted exploration within the city, where you also meet people. Then you experience transformation, and then you depart and come back changed. And so with this thought in mind, the Magical Trips team decided to test it in reality. And so I'm sure many of you out there have done sort of usability testing on a product experience you might have created, but the way that we think about testing is dramatically different. This is about somebody's life and transformation that can occur with a person. And so we looked inside of Airbnb, we asked people, is there anybody that you know who might be open to transformational travel? And Francisco was somebody who was recommended. And so we had two people, Katie and Carolyn, who were trip directors who planned Francisco's entire trip, his end-to-end trip, from the flight to landing in San Francisco to meeting new people. And we wanted to see if we could actually create a transformational travel experience that Francisco truly loved. And let's take a look at how this turned out.
Bueno, yo me llamo Francisco y soy de Santiago de Chile. Por mi profesión, que yo soy arquitecto, entonces yo trabajo construyendo cosas, diseñando. Y yo creo que ser homosexual en Chile, sí, es difícil. Es un poco un ciudadano de segunda categoría. Entonces por eso busco, no sé, un lugar que me acepte. Cuando llegué a San Francisco, estaba un poco nervioso. Sí, bueno, fui al Meyer.
As you travel through this life, remember this.
La primera noche me sentí... Mira, de hecho no tengo muchos recuerdos. A ver, la mañana del tercer día...
Yours? No? Your adventure begins here at 11:45. Wow, buena.
Bueno, cuando fui con la croquera hasta el restaurante y ahí me estaba esperando una chica al Eismann. Muy bonita, muy hippie. Sí, y ahí me llevó a recorrer un poco la ciudad.
Hey, hi, how are you? Good, good. Nice to meet you. Come on in. So your room is right here on the right.
Lovely room.
Back many years ago, being gay, it wasn't that cool. But in California, it was very different. It's more about who you are and what you do and what you produce than who you love. Oh wow, thank you. Wow, that's very sweet. I wanted to welcome Francisco to San Francisco. So happy to share it with you.
Pucha, así que es increíble que alguien te abra las puertas de la casa. puertas de su círculo de amigos. De hecho, me pasó cuando estaba durmiendo. Cerré los ojos y en algún momento sentí que estaba en mi cama. Sí, como en casa. Sí. Bueno, lo que más me gustó es esta convivencia que se vive en la ciudad, en San Francisco. Que en general, en la sociedad en San Francisco, como la cultura cívica, sí, yo creo como que se basa un poco en el respeto.
I'm Robert. Nice to meet you. What is this? We met 2 years ago, and then we got married this past year.
Did you propose to me too?
Yeah, the flash mob. This giant mob of people comes
Oh
around this
my
car,
gosh.
and I get down.
Oh my God.
I like watching.
Traté de no hacerme muchas expectativas con este viaje. Hoy el viaje ha sido, yo creo, la experiencia más surrealista, más loca que he tenido en la vida. No, yo creo que sí, yo creo que ser gay es lo más difícil que me ha tocado en la vida. Que cuando hablas con la verdad no hay nada que esconder. Y oye, te saca un peso de encima porque no tienes nada que esconder.
Every time I see that film, I still get a little bit like choked up. It's kind of weird. This is one of the reasons why I work at Airbnb is that we set out to try to do things like this. And so the team learned a lot of things from Francisco's experience. The main thing that they learned is that the magic is really in the people. That was fundamental to it. That was fundamental to the transformation. They also recognized that they really have an uphill battle in terms of scaling this transformational experience so that everybody could have this, not just one person, but far more people. Because that first trip, it took those trip directors 80 hours a week each to plan. And the team had a goal to get us to 150 trips per week. And we need to do this efficiently, only 3 hours per week to actually plan the trips, because it doesn't scale. It takes you 160 hours to plan one trip. If you want to do 150 trips, that's 24,000 hours per week, and it's just impossible. So that was their goal. It was a big, audacious goal. And so they wanted to focus on trip planning efficiency, how to reduce the time to scale this, and then quality of transformation to make sure that they could capture the essence of what we learned with Francisco's travel. And like any good design team, we focused on various sort of iterations. So we had a batch of 4 people first, 6 people, and then 8. And with each one of these, we had different objectives that we wanted to test and try. And the experience was really one of testing. Some things worked, some things didn't. We failed, we learned from that, and then we repeated it. And so I'll walk you through the experience they had. We'll start with a batch of 4, so 4 people. That was the goal. The goal here was to get 4 people to take a trip. So the team divided into 4 guests. They had 4 new guests, and the trip directors worked directly with these guests. And then the Magical Trips team worked with hosts. And what the hosts did is we got these super hosts from San Francisco, and we had them pre-submit experiences. In other words, we asked hosts to give us experiences they thought would be fun for guests and that guests could really enjoy. And here's an example of an experience provided by Michelle, who was a host. She wanted to do a brunch and Vespa tour. And so she put this together, and then she actually gave Faith a brunch and Vespa tour. So a unique experience for Faith. And this is a really interesting session here, this first batch, because what the team learned is that they could actually attain a high level of efficiency, but the guests reported that not all of the experiences that were created were super transformational. And so for the next batch, the batch of 6, the team brought hosts in as partners. And what that meant is that we called a number of hosts. We brought them into Airbnb's headquarters. We taught them about our brand and our mission, our cultural values. So they really deeply internalized what we were trying to attain. And then these hosts completed a set of applications for new experiences. So now they have a better model for what kind of experiences we were looking to create for our guests. And they input their own availability. So for example, Nikki, one of the hosts, is a naturalist, and she really understands the flora and fauna in Northern California. And she also, has experience sort of like in meditation. And so she wanted to kind of combine those things together in like the Zen meditation walk. And so we looked at these, and some were reviewed and some were rejected. And then we had this next batch of guests come in, and the trip directors still planned all of the trips for these guests. And during this batch, many of the guests actually did have transformational experiences. So here's Nikki on a redwood hike with Karina and John. And again, Nikki's focus here was it's more a meditative hike through the woods where she helped people understand the nature that was around them. And Karina said that through this experience, she actually had a little bit of a transformation. She found a better sense of self. And so what this batch helped us learn is that, well, we can improve the quality of the experience, but unfortunately, we weren't getting to a higher level of efficiency. And so for the next batch, everybody on the Magical Trips team decided to play the role of the trip director. So this was Carolyn and Katie's role, the people who were spending 80 hours a week designing these trips. So we called this the dog food batch. And in the tech industry, dog food means that you're basically eating what you build, so you really experience it yourself. And so everybody on the Magical Trips team partnered with the guest, including our CEO and the VP of the product, that they worked with guests directly to start planning their trip. And as this new team of people started down the road of planning trips, they got stuck at the beginning of the process. By the way, it was a 30-step process between hosts and guests and planning, and they got stuck here, where they were diagnosing guests' needs and wants for transformation. And what they all sort of collectively realized is that this notion of transformation was arbitrary. And this challenge then caused them to take a step back, and they had a big unlock, because then the entire team, including its leaders, wanted to really understand what is our consistent understanding and definition of transformation. On the one hand, you have Francisco and his experience. That's on the extreme, where he experienced a life change. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got a change in mood, which you get with commoditized travel typically. You're happier after it. But there's something in the middle, and it's really interesting, this middle portion, which is really around having a need addressed through your trip. You might have a missing skill that you gain. You might become more social. You might gain a greater sense of self-confidence. You might actually gain a better level of respect for others. These are all different types of needs that people have. And so the team realized that, well, transformational travel doesn't need to be as dramatic as the hero's journey. Instead, they want it to be delightful and fun and positive. And now, armed with this insight, the team pressed on. They went through this batch of 8, and they learned more about transformation, obviously, but it still wasn't really becoming more efficient. So then they did another batch. This was a batch of 12, and they got greater efficiency, but then the transformation became lower. And then they went up to do a batch of 24, and this time they really invested in focusing on how to create an itinerary that was easier to use. We created a digital itinerary that cut down the time to plan trips. And we put a lot more effort into the transformational experiences. And this one was pretty successful. We had 90% success rate for transformational experiences for the guests. And the team continued to drive efficiency and learn more about transformation. But they also came to realize something very important through this process, that in order to scale Magical Trips to everybody, not just the 150, but everybody who might want that, which was ultimately the goal, it would be incredibly important to focus on each and every ingredient that made up the Magical Trip. Just like with movies, as we were discussing before. If you've got, 4 A-list actors working, they're great actors working on this movie, you're far more likely to get an Academy Award than if you've got 500 D-list actors. And I don't even want to see that movie, frankly, but you're not going to get the Academy Award with the 500 D-list actors working on it. And so the same it is with travel. If each ingredient of the trip is perfect, the overarching trip has a better chance to be magical. And so when they looked into the core ingredients of travel, they found that the essential ones are transportation, hosts, homes, experiences, and services. And now we've spun up dedicated teams that are focusing on each one of these areas. So we have a team that's focusing on making experiences great. They've just released concerts, which are fantastic experiences. We just had John Legend play for a small set of people in LA. I mean, it was a really, really amazing experience. We're focusing on services. How can we provide services to specific types of people? So I've got a family. I need a babysitter. How do I get that when I'm traveling? And then we focus on hosts. We've got our super host program, which help hosts understand hospitality better. And then lastly, the most important ingredient is homes, which leads me to the next story. This is a story about how Airbnb really took a new product and made it into reality. And this product is about homes. And our goal was to really make homes as lovable as possible. So this is the story of Airbnb Plus and how we created Airbnb Plus. So what is Airbnb Plus? It's beautiful homes that are hosted by people who provide exceptional hospitality. But perhaps most importantly, these homes are verified for quality. We launched Airbnb Plus earlier this year in February of 2018. And we launched with only 2,000 homes in 13 markets. Now, Airbnb is all over the world, and we actually have around 5 million homes on the platform. And so Plus was a very, very small launch. And we've been really focused on making sure that these homes are perfect. And as you'll see, it's very challenging to get us there. But we want to make the product perfect before then scaling it. See, the challenge with making Plus homes is that we have an end-to-end design process, and we're deeply engaged in every step of the process. From onboarding, when we're evaluating whether a host and their home would actually be in Plus, to then helping hosts upgrade their home. Because when homes come into Plus, we often find that there's things that we need to do to help the home elevate. To capturing the home's unique beauty, we actually, as you'll see, we need to capture each home and really magnify what makes it beautiful and unique. And then we merchandise the home on our app and our website. And we're engaging with the host at every step throughout this design process. So let's start with the first part. When a new home enters the system, we have this 100-point checklist. That's 100 points at a minimum. Sometimes there's more to verify whether the home is Plus worthy. We look for things like cleanliness, they have the right kitchen complements. There's even one point in the checklist that's a rule about pillows. You have to have 2 pillows per bed. And this is really important. They have to be both fresh and fluffy. And we'll verify this. Like if they're not fresh and fluffy, it's not going to work. You think that's subjective, but it's not. There's an objective way to analyze whether a pillow is fresh and fluffy. We have a little fluffy meter that we just kind of... Okay, so then we send a home inspector to verify the quality standard. So we actually have a human who comes to the homes. Now, again, imagine scaling this across 160 countries. We have to make sure all these home inspectors are trained. And then if needed, we help the host upgrade their home. So this is where we don't want to be, this left column, basic, generic, outdated, and bare. We want to help hosts get to this, transform their home to this other side. And we have a number of different programs to help them do this. We've got a host store that provides them with the right accessories and amenities. We have interior designers who help our hosts and can coach our hosts. But taste and style are very personal, so we're very careful about this. This is taking a home from basic to personality, from generic to unique, from outdated to stylish, although I'm not sure about that painting. From bare to minimal. And so this is the process we go through to help hosts transform their homes. And then we send professional photographers into the homes to capture them in their best light. And this process has been very challenging because, again, when you deploy across 13 different cities, you've got a bunch of different photographers coming in that you have to develop a set of rigorous photo guidelines. The way we shoot the photos is precise and consistent. The way that we do the lighting is precise and consistent. So here's a set of photos that have been taken of, I think this is Joanne's home. And this took us many rounds of iteration to get right because we were getting back a lot of photos that just weren't clear and consistent. And the goal is that when you look across any Plus home on Airbnb, the angle of photography across each home and amongst the set is going to always be consistent. It should look clear and consistent. And the results of this whole process has been very powerful. People who have tried Plus, it's just the ratings that guests give these homes is incredible. I've stayed in a number of them. They are really amazing homes. And what it's important to realize is that we're not building a boutique hotel with, say, 50 units, all of which are designed to be somewhat unique. These are individual people's homes, each of which is unique. And here's 3 examples. This is Yves' home in San Francisco. He's a transplant from France, and he works in renewable energy, and he's a super host. And this is a beautiful space. It's really well designed. This is Joanne. This is her modern home in Venice. This is an entire home you can book. She's a super host. This home is in my wish list. Someday I will stay there with my family. It looks amazing. This is Todd and Kimberly's Airstream. So we also have unique listings in Plus, things like cabins, Airstreams, boats. The boats are pretty cool. And so Todd and Kimberly are super hosts who've been hosting with Airbnb since 2012. And they've only over 200 guests have stayed in this Airstream. So you can kind of get a feel for the quality. So Plus is performing really well. People love it. It's across the 13 markets. And the goal now, the team has established, we've created something that we think is really good, that people love. So we want to move from this 2,000 total to ideally 2,000 homes added per week. And that's going to be a huge challenge. And the team is going to need to test and fail and learn and iterate. And that's the way they're going to get to a level of scale that will allow us to really provide this to everybody. So that's Plus. Before I move on to the last part of my presentation, I just wanted to share with you something that we typically make with launches. It's a video that showcases the way that we sort of feel about Plus. And it showcases a number of homes and their actual hosts in their homes to give you a better feel for this. All right, so that video showed the diversity of the homes and how each is so uniquely styled and how each is super high quality. So that's the main ingredient, these homes. All right, so to wrap up, what have we learned? First, we've learned that designing products that people love just isn't easy. It's hard. We've also learned that the best place to start is by building something that at least one person truly loves. And then you got to work like hell to scale it. And it's not going to be easy. You're going to need to test and fail and learn and repeat that process over and over again. But what you learn from that process will be invaluable because you'll learn about each of the ingredients that makes up that lovable product that you're trying to create. And if you make each ingredient great, just like Plus is that one ingredient for the home, if you make each ingredient great, combined, they'll all lead to a product that people truly love. Thank you.